Rounding is a really important skill in maths. In maths tests, you might be asked to round your final answers to 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places, or significant figures. So we'll start off with 1 decimal place. So to round this number to 1 decimal place, I'm going to go to the decimal place, look at the number after it, so 1 number after the decimal place, and draw a line. So then I'm going to have a peek at the next number after the line. If this number is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it would push the 4 up to a 5, but in this case it's not. So 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 push the number up 1, but in this case it was a 2, so it leaves it as a 4, so this is 9.4. The next one, again I'm going to draw a line after 1 number after the decimal place, and then I'm going to have a peek at the next one. 6 pushes the 2 up to a 3 because it's one of the numbers that pushes up. So this rounds up to 114.3. And the next one, it can be tricky to round with numbers with 9s in. So I'm going to draw my line again, 1 number after the number after the decimal, and then I'm going to check the 9. Now you could look at it as 9 pushing the 9 up, but I like to look at it as 19, so pretend that's 19. 9 is rounding 19 up to 20, so that 1.9 becomes 20, but I still need to put the decimal place in. Using the same idea, I'm going to round these numbers up to 2 decimal places, but this time I need to draw the line after 2 numbers after the decimal place, so there. So 8 pushes a 7 up to an 8, so this number becomes 20.48. The next one, 2 numbers after the decimal, the line goes there. So 0 gets pushed up to a 1, so this number becomes 13.01. 2 numbers after the decimal, so this one is 123.95. And then the final one, 2 numbers after the decimal, the 4 doesn't do anything to the 3, so we leave that as a 3. 12.03. I've used these squiggly lines because rounding is an approximation, so that is roughly that. Okay, so have a go at rounding these numbers to 1 decimal place and 2 decimal places, so you can pause the video here. And here are the answers. So next, I'm going to look at rounding to significant figures. It's quite common for you to be asked to round something to 3 significant figures in an exam. So when you're rounding to 3 significant figures, you need to think of significant meaning important. So when we look at the first number, the first 3 important figures are these. So you circle the first 3 numbers, and then you have a peek at the 4 and see if that does anything to the 3. Now because 4 is not a number that pushes up, this stays as 50.3. So it also looks like it's been rounded to 1 decimal, but it's also been rounded to 3 significant figures. So let's have a look at the next one. Circle the first 3. 8 pushes the 7 up to an 8, so this one becomes 6.58. Next one. Circle the first 3. 3 does not do anything to the 8 there, so I'm going to write 178. And it does look like it's been rounded to the nearest whole as well, and that's okay. So if we just compare the 3 numbers, you know, this one's got 1 number after the decimal, this one's got 2, and this one's just a whole number, and that's okay. We've still got the first important 3 numbers. So for this one, I'm going to peek at the 8 and see what it does to the 5. It's going to push it up to a 6, so that's going to be 2, 3, 6. Now because we've got the first 3 important numbers, everything else becomes 0, so I need to include a 0 here. Looking at the next one, we're going to have some zeros in this one. So 1 doesn't do anything to the 3. I'm going to write down the first 3 important figures and everything else becomes 0. You need to include the zeros because if you didn't have the zeros, 143 would not be a good approximation for 14,319, so you have to include those zeros. Now for very small numbers, you circle the first 3 numbers that are not 0. So these are the first 3 numbers that are not 0, and for the small numbers you do have to include the zeros before. So have a peek at the 1, that doesn't do anything to the 4, so it's 0.00524, and I don't need to include the zeros after, because I could put 3 zeros in, but there's no need. And finally the last one, 9 is going to push that 4 up to a 5. Because it's a really small number, I need to include the zeros. 2, 3, 6, 3, 5. And I don't need to include the zeros after. So here's some for you to have a go at. You can pause the video here. And here are the answers.